Hi folks, welcome to Study Skills Writing a Lab Report. Now this session is going to be the fundamentals of what needs to go into your report and give you a bit of an insight of what we're expecting for the foundation degree sports. So if we're looking here first and foremost, our title of investigation, introduction, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion, references and appendices are areas that we're going to be looking at. Now, the thing is what we've got to look from here, when we're looking at what we put in each individual sections, the overall thing we must understand is this lab report has already happened. So you are reporting on something that has previously happened, so we must write in past tense. So what that would be is instead of will do, the term did would occur instead of there. Okay. Okay, the second thing that we need to consider as well is, like we said previously, this is a scientific lab report, so it needs to be in scientific writing. Third person narrative is the term that we use. So we do not use the term I, me, us, we, because that's a personal, what we call first person. So this needs to be third person. So start off with what we're going to do is your title of investigation is usually given out on the top of your handout. So any page that we're looking for is the title. Now here's two examples. Here's one from the effective stage duration on maximal heart rate and post-exercise blood lactate, concentration during incremental treadmill test. So this is the actual title. So that the title gives an insight of what the actual thing's about. Secondly, here's another one, running economy and distance running performance of highly trained athletes. So this is the title of the investigation. So that always needs to go at the top of what you're looking for. Excuse me. So secondly, we'll look at introduction. So first thing, to identify, we've got to look at what the introduction's about. So what is this investigation? What are we looking for? What is the whole biggest thing? For example, within physiology, we look at running economy, we look at power output, we look at lactate threshold, we look at the effect of heat. So that is talking about what is the investigation about. So looking at your writing, this needs to be introduced within your work. Secondly, why are you actually looking at this? So I want a little bit of background reading of why we actually need to look at this in the first place. So if we're looking at lactate threshold, for instance, that lactate threshold would be, well, actually, lactate threshold has been shown that we can improve by identifying where the threshold is and then being able to train that environment or train that specific section to make you more efficient and more better. So looking at this as well, we want to see what's been done previously. So this is where your background research comes into this. So you're looking at about 2 or 3 studies to say, well, actually, is there anything on your specific topic? What did they find? And this will then show what we're looking at to find from your own study. Remember, the difference of citations and paraphrasing. Paraphrasing, we want to be actually acknowledging we know what the actual information is about by rewriting it in your own form with an acknowledgement. Whereas a citation is just basically a copy and paste of somebody's information. Think about the word count you've got. We've got to be able to become very descriptive but not woolly. So we need to be concise with our descriptions. Think about this at the end of your introduction is what is the aim? What are you trying to find out? So you've discussed what is the investigation, you've discussed why you're doing this, you've looked at background reading to give you an insight of why you're doing this, and then your final aim of what you should find. You need to then look at the prediction. Okay, so what do you think will happen? From your understanding, give what this is called a hypothesis. What do you predict will happen from your score? We then want to look at the word count. It's only about 300-400 words, so it doesn't want to be the bulk. You've got 1,000 words. Is made up of your introduction and your discussion. So these are the 2 main areas that we're looking to get the key information in. So look at those 5 elements there and then say, well, actually, if I do this as a checklist on my introduction, do these 5 things actually cover what I'm covering? Okay, and am I writing 300 to 400 words to be concise to show the key information? Okay, so we move over to methodology. Methodology broken down into 3 parts, and I want to know specifically about the participants. You're going to tell us the age, the gender, the weight, the height, the sport, subject, and so forth. So we need to know this information because then when you actually look back at discussing the actual participant, you can give a rationale why there may be differences in your figures due to their age, due to their gender, weight, height, and so forth. We then break down the second section, which is equipment. So this methodology would be our overall point, broken down into subheadings, participants, equipment. So what was used? Technical information if possible. Okay, ensure that within the identification of what you've got, actually covers all of that equipment. Thirdly, is the protocol. So the protocol doesn't want to be woolly, but it's got to be descriptive in a sense of it has got to be able to be replicated. So the instructions you're given is how it was carried out. You don't need to say who did what, where, and when. All you need to do is basically say this was carried out from this process. So we don't need people's names. We don't need whose role was what. All you need to do is basically put it in specific key points of this was done and this was done. So think about it like reading a book. If you're trying to make a cup of soup, you need to know from the step one to the end of creating that. So if it would be putting your ingredients in a mug, to putting the hot water in, to stirring it and letting it settle, for how long have you let it settle, and then that would be our specifics so we can follow this. Again, 200-300 words maximum. Okay, so please do not go to town on this. Do not put too much information on. Be very conscious of your word count. Bear in mind your word count, if you've got 10% either way. So if it's 1,000 words, you've got 1,100 and 900 that you can be within that range. If you start going over, then that will have a knock-on effect on grades. Okay, results. So we've talked about this before. Table of information with results. So if I put a table in, I want a table underneath to tell me what this is. So that's an example table from the practice. 100 words only for the titles. Now you don't put any description at all about the results. All you put is a title for each of those, and then the hard work of that goes into the discussion. So I've got a table. If you've used a table, I want it included every single time so I can see the raw data. Then secondly, we'll look at the graphs. Again, with the graphs, I want titles, so it'd be graph 1, telling me what's happening in there, because then we can refer specifically back to these. So another example of a graph, a lactate curve, we've got the lactate millimole down the side, we have got a time factor down here. However, I would like to see, this is right here, so we can see this point. We do not want to have we do not want to see any titles there. This wants to go underneath. Best thing as well, what I would say is this here is the legend. Now the legend, I would say put it at the bottom because it'll let you expand the graph more and it'll make it clearer. And bottom title. Okay, so make sure they're there and with a title underneath so we know exactly what we're looking for there. Okay, so the results section, as I said, it's just about titles and the actual data. So you're looking at a couple of graphs to show that. Now the discussion is where all of the information comes to. Specifically, you're going to talk about what is happening within your results. So you're going to identify key points that is happening with the results in order to be very specific. But we then need to refer to these directly. So if your graph is called graph 1 and you're discussing graph 1, you then need to talk about that as graph 1. Do not give any participants names. Do not use any personal information. Your participants will be participant 1 and 2 or subject 1 and 2. So your discussion needs to refer back to these as that. So just a key point on there. Direct your information to the specific graphs you're talking about and no personal writing about any information. Then what you've looked at is backing this up. You're talking about what's happened, but now you need to know, well, what actually is this? What should be happening? Am I getting any data that actually contrasts and contradicts what the research states? Should I get this profile with this specific athlete? What could actually be affecting this? So we're looking at a comparison. So your comparison element would be that if I'm comparing something, I want to know, am I finding exactly the same? So you're making a comparison. My data suggests that X, Y, and Z, this is exactly the same as what somebody else found in 2013. Now, if you're looking on the would be that a contrast is an opposing argument. Does your data find different things of what research you're finding? If so, why is this actually happening? Why is this happening and why should it be? It may be something to do with the methodology. Is your methodology different? Is the environment or the equipment different? Looking at this, if we're going to be doing that then, we need to then think about, well actually, is it a limitation that's actually we've done to find that something is different? So this is where your basis of your research needs to be used. So you're actually doing a comparison of findings from research, looking at the key information, looking at your textbook, looking at data from journals. So if there's anything specifically, limitations could be that the athlete is from a different sport to what you've actually tested. So if you're using a running machine, they may be a cyclist, so that'll have a different energy system. It'll have a different economy of where you're running. So it may have a different factor on there. So it may be not the way they train. So take that into consideration. That is a limitation. A limitation is not that you've got cheap equipment and it may be faulty. A limitation is in the process rather than the making from there. Okay, and the conclusion is a final paragraph to summarise your findings. So all I want to see is a final paragraph. Now, if we go back to the discussion, that's where the basis we look into, about 400, 500 words for your discussion, and then your conclusion is about 50 words, if that. Okay, so your conclusion, your main findings. From reviewing this research, it's been found that X, Y, and Z occurs because of this. Okay, finally, your references. Harvard APA style. You will get knocked down for referencing. There is examples of referencing on the Interact, so we need to use that on your study skills section, and we need to keep trialing this. In referencing within work, if it's a paraphrase, what we need to do is the surname of the author and the date, and if it is a citation, it is the author, the surname of the author, should I say, the date and the page specific to where you've got it from. The references in hand needs to be on the section at the end in alphabetical order of author. So Andrews would be before Burnett, would be before Carlton, would be before Derricks, and so forth from there down to Z. Okay, so here's an example of Harvard referencing. So Catch, Cart, McArdle, and Catch. What this is missing here, okay, is you are missing author's initials. Okay, so we're not sure what those initials are there, so they need to be put in. Look at this here. We have got that's the title of the book, which is in italics. Okay, so making sure that you've got these correct. So you've got the edition and you've got the publisher. Okay, so if you're not sure about your writing, here's another section. Okay, which is another book. Now, be conscious of how this differs from the journals. Okay. So looking back at this, we've got Catch and Sharky. Sharky's after K, so it would be in that alphabetical order. So bearing in mind, you go off the first author. Now appendices. Not every single report has these, but what this is it's an appendix section. An appendix gives you the ability to put additional work in there. For instance, if you wanted to put protocols of fitness tests, if you wanted to put any additional information like questionnaires, you can put those in there. Now, when you are doing that, it's not just a dumping ground. You need to use them and identify them within your work. So you would say, if you called it Appendix A or Appendix 1, you need to refer that within your work, saying this can be found in Appendix A, Appendix from there. Okay, so looking at this, folks, utilise this and go through it as a checklist. Have you covered all of these sections? Have you covered these in detail? You've got a 1,000-word lab report. If you've got a 1,000-word lab report, stick to that lab report. Think about reading through your work. Does it read correctly? Does it read woolly? And take it from there. Okay. Any questions? Send me an email.